I never imagined my 62nd birthday would end with my own daughter-in-law calling me names in front of an entire restaurant. But there I was, watching my plate of chicken parmesan crash to the floor while Rebecca stood over me, her face twisted with pure hatred. "You manipulative old woman. You should have stayed home." The sound of breaking ceramic seemed to echo forever in the sudden silence. Every person in Romano's turned to stare at our table. I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment as marinara sauce splattered across my new blue dress, the one I'd bought specially for tonight because Michael had actually called to invite me out for my birthday. My son sat frozen in his chair, staring down at his hands like they held the secrets of the universe. Not once did he look at me. Not once did he tell his wife to stop. "Michael," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Please." He finally raised his eyes, but there was no warmth there. Just exhaustion and something that looked almost like resentment. "Mom, maybe you should go home. We'll talk later." Those words hit me harder than any physical blow could have. After months of trying to reach him, months of calls that went straight to voicemail and brief conversations where he always seemed in a hurry to hang up, I thought tonight would be different. I thought maybe we could finally bridge whatever gap had opened between us. I'd spent 3 hours getting ready. I'd even brought a small photo album filled with pictures of Michael growing up, memories I hoped we could look through together over dessert. How foolish that seemed now. "I don't understand what I've done wrong," I managed to say, my hands shaking as I reached for my purse. Rebecca let out a harsh laugh. "Of course you don't. You never do. Always playing the victim. Aren't you, Helen? Poor Helen, all alone in that big house. Maybe if you hadn't spent Michael's entire childhood suffocating him, he wouldn't need therapy to deal with the damage you caused." The word therapy hit me like a physical blow. I looked at Michael, confusion and hurt washing over me in waves. "Therapy? What is she talking about?" Michael shifted uncomfortably in his seat but still wouldn't meet my eyes. "It's nothing, Mom. Just some stuff I'm working through." "It's not nothing," Rebecca snapped. "Tell her how you can't make a decision without second-guessing yourself, because she controlled every aspect of your life. Tell her how you spent years believing you weren't good enough, because nothing you did ever met her impossible standards." I felt like the room was spinning. "Michael, that's not true. I always supported you. Everything I did was to help you succeed." "Help?" Rebecca's voice got even louder. "You call monitoring his every move helping? You call questioning every friend he made, every decision he wanted to make, every dream he had, you call that helping?" The waiter appeared with nervous energy, clearly wanting to help but unsure how to handle the situation. Other diners weren't even pretending not to watch anymore. I could hear whispered conversations and feel their eyes boring into me. "I raised you alone after your father died," I said quietly to Michael, my voice breaking. "I worked 3 jobs to put you through college. I sacrificed everything for you. And you never let me forget it," he finally said, looking up at me with eyes full of pain. "Every choice I tried to make, you reminded me of how much you'd given up. Every time I wanted to be independent, you made me feel guilty for even thinking about it." Rebecca crossed her arms, satisfaction written all over her face. "At least he's finally being honest. Do you know how long it took me to help him understand that your behavior wasn't normal? That other mothers don't guilt-trip their children into staying dependent on them forever." I tried to process what they were saying, but it felt like trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing. Had I really been that controlling? Had my love somehow damaged my son? "I brought you a birthday gift," I said weakly, pulling a small wrapped box from my purse. "For Sophie. Her birthday is next week." Sophie was my granddaughter, 7 years old and absolutely beautiful. I hadn't seen her in almost 6 months, despite living only 20 minutes away. Every time I called to arrange a visit, Rebecca had an excuse. Sophie was busy with activities, or they were going out of town, or she was getting over a cold. Rebecca looked at the gift like it was something disgusting. "She doesn't need your cheap presents, Helen. We've told you this before. She has plenty of toys." "It's not cheap," I protested. "I picked it out specially for her. It's a music box with a little ballerina inside. I thought she might like it since she's taking dance classes." "How do you even know she's taking dance classes?" Rebecca demanded. "Have you been asking around about us? Checking up on our business?" Michael mentioned it the last time we talked." "When was that?" 3 months ago. Rebecca turned to Michael. See? This is exactly what I'm talking about. She thinks she has the right to know everything about our lives, but she contributes nothing positive to them. The accusation stung because there was a grain of truth in it. I had been asking mutual friends about Michael and his family. When your own son barely speaks to you, you get desperate for any information about how he's doing. I love you both, I said, my voice getting stronger despite the tears threatening to spill over. I love Sophie and little Tommy. You're my family. You're all I have left. That's the problem right there, Rebecca said coldly. We're not responsible for filling the empty space in your life. Michael has his own family now, his own responsibilities. You need to find your own purpose instead of trying to live through us. Michael finally spoke up, but not in my defense. Mom, Rebecca's right. You do tend to insert yourself into situations where you're not really needed. Not needed. The words came out louder than I intended. I'm your mother. When am I not needed? When we're trying to have a private family dinner, Rebecca answered before Michael could respond. When we're making decisions about our children's upbringing. When we're planning our future. You act like you should have a say in everything, but you don't. I stood up slowly, my legs feeling unsteady. The marinara sauce had dried sticky on my dress, and I could smell the garlic and herbs that had once made my mouth water. Now they just made me feel sick. I'm sorry I ruined your evening, I said, trying to maintain whatever dignity I had left. I'll go now. I expected Michael to protest, to ask me to stay, to say we could work this out. Instead, he just nodded and said, I'll call you tomorrow, Mom. But I knew he wouldn't. Just like he hadn't called for the past 3 weeks, despite promising to each time we spoke. I walked through the restaurant with my head held high, even though I could feel every pair of eyes following my progress to the door. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip my car keys, and once I was safely inside my Honda, I finally let the tears come. Through the restaurant window, I could see Michael and Rebecca continuing their meal as if nothing had happened, as if I had never been there at all. Rebecca was laughing at something on her phone, and Michael was cutting his steak with careful precision. They looked relieved. The drive home took forever. Every red light seemed to last an eternity, giving me more time to replay the evening in my mind. Had I really been as controlling as they claimed? I thought back to Michael's childhood, trying to see my actions through their lens. Yes, I had been protective. When David died of a heart attack at 45, leaving me alone with a 12-year-old son, I'd been terrified of making the wrong choices. Every decision felt monumental. Should I let Michael play football when I was afraid he'd get injured? Should I allow sleepovers when I didn't know the other parents well? Should I encourage him to go to college across the country when I'd be completely alone? Maybe I had asked too many questions about his friends. Maybe I had offered unsolicited advice too often. But it had all come from a place of love and fear, love for my son and fear of failing him the way I felt I'd failed his father by not recognizing the signs of his heart condition. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car for a long time, looking at the house David and I had bought 38 years ago. It was a beautiful 2-story colonial with a wraparound porch and mature oak trees that we'd planted when Michael was a toddler. The same trees he'd climbed as a boy, where he'd carved his initials when he was 10, where he'd sat reading books during lazy summer afternoons. Now it felt too big, too quiet, too full of memories that seemed to mock me. Inside, I made myself a cup of tea and sat in David's old recliner, surrounded by photo albums and the deafening silence of an empty house. I looked through pictures of Michael's childhood, his first day of school, his high school graduation, his wedding day where he'd looked so happy and I'd been so hopeful about gaining a daughter. Had Rebecca been planning this attack all along? Or had I really done something so terrible that it justified public humiliation on my birthday? I thought about all the times I'd tried to connect with her over the years. The birthday cards I'd sent that went unacknowledged. The offers to babysit that were politely declined. The suggestions for family get-togethers that somehow never materialized. I'd attributed her coolness to shyness or perhaps some cultural difference. She'd grown up in a much more affluent family than ours. But maybe she'd simply decided from the beginning that I was the enemy. The clock on the mantel chimed midnight, officially ending my birthday. I'd received 3 phone calls. One from my neighbor asking if I wanted to go to church together on Sunday, one from my dental office confirming an appointment, and one from a telemarketer trying to sell me a home security system. Not one call from my son wishing me a happy birthday. Not one text from my grandchildren, though they were probably too young to remember on their own. I finally went to bed around 2 in the morning, but sleep wouldn't come. Instead, I lay staring at the ceiling, going over every word that had been spoken at dinner. By dawn, something had shifted inside me. The hurt was still there, sharp and constant, but it was joined by something else. Clarity. For too long, I'd been accepting crumbs from my son's table, grateful for whatever small acknowledgement he was willing to give me. I'd been walking on eggshells around Rebecca, trying to win her approval by making myself smaller and smaller until I'd practically disappeared from their lives entirely. But I was done disappearing. I reached for the phone on my nightstand and dialed a number I hadn't used in months. Patricia? It's Helen Morrison. I know it's early, but I need your help with something. Can we meet today? Patricia had been David's business partner and our family lawyer for over 20 years. If anyone could help me figure out my next move, it would be her. Of course, Helen. Is everything all right? I looked out my bedroom window at the sunrise painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, and for the first time in months I felt like maybe it would be. It will be, I said. It definitely will be. Patricia's office smelled like leather and coffee, the same comforting sense I remembered from all those years when David and I had worked with her to build our business. She looked at me over her reading glasses, the same concerned expression she'd worn when helping me navigate David's estate after his death. You're absolutely certain about this approach, Helen? She asked, reviewing the documents I'd brought with me. I've never been more certain of anything in my life, I replied, my voice steadier than it had been in months. What Michael and Rebecca didn't know, what I'd kept hidden for years out of some misguided desire to let them feel independent, was about to change everything. The truth was, I wasn't just Michael's aging mother living on a teacher's pension and Social Security. That story was a carefully maintained fiction. After David died, everyone expected me to sell Morrison and Associates Construction and retire quietly. Instead, I'd taken over the company and quietly grown it into the most successful residential construction firm in 3 counties. I lived modestly not because I had to, but because I chose to. The house I kept mostly for the memories, not because I needed to impress anyone. But the biggest secret was Michael's house. The beautiful colonial in Riverside Heights that he and Rebecca believed they purchased at an incredible bargain 3 years ago. I owned it. When Michael had mentioned wanting to move to that neighborhood but not being able to afford it, I'd quietly bought the house through my company and arranged for them to purchase it through a private sale at barely half its market value. Michael thought he'd gotten lucky with a motivated seller. In reality, I still held the deed, and their mortgage payments went into a trust fund I'd established for Sophie and Tommy's college educations. The letter should arrive today, Patricia said, interrupting my thoughts. Are you prepared for the reaction? The letter she'd prepared would inform Rebecca that the credit card she'd been using so freely, the one she believed was linked to Michael's account, was actually supplemented by me. Every month when she maxed it out on shopping sprees and spa treatments, my money covered the difference. Michael had no idea. He assumed his architect's salary covered their lavish lifestyle. It didn't. Not even close. I'm prepared, I said, though my heart ached thinking about what was coming. It's time for some honesty in this family. I left Patricia's office and drove to the small diner where I often went to think. As I sat in my usual corner booth, nursing a cup of coffee that had grown cold, my phone rang. Michael's name flashed on the screen. Hello, Michael. Mom, what the hell is going on? His voice was tight with anger and confusion. Rebecca just got some letter from a lawyer saying her credit card has been frozen, and that you've been supplementing our expenses for 3 years? That's correct, I said calmly. Silence stretched between us. I could almost hear him trying to process this information. What are you talking about? That doesn't make any sense. Michael, we need to have a conversation. About finances. About the truth. About your house. My house? What about my house? I took a deep breath. The house is in my name, Michael. It always has been. Another long silence. That's impossible. I have the mortgage documents. I make payments every month. Yes, you do. To a trust one established for the children. I own the house, Michael. I've been helping you financially for years, but after what happened last night, I think it's time we were honest with each other. This is insane, he sputtered. You're making this up because Rebecca hurt your feelings. This is exactly the kind of manipulative behavior she was talking about. His words stung, but I kept my voice level. I'll be home all afternoon. Come by when you're ready to see the documentation. Bring Rebecca if you want. I'll have everything ready. I hung up before he could respond, my hands surprisingly steady. For too long, I'd allowed myself to be pushed to the margins of my son's life, watching silently as Rebecca systematically turned him against me. I tried to buy their tolerance with secret financial support, never asking for acknowledgement or gratitude. No more. 2 hours later, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Michael standing there alone, his face a storm of confusion and anger. Prove it, he demanded, pushing past me into the house. I led him to the dining room where I'd carefully laid out all the documents. The deed to their house with my name clearly visible. Bank statements showing the monthly supplements to Rebecca's spending. Tax records proving I still owned Morrison and Associates Construction. Insurance policies. Investment portfolios. Years of financial records that painted a very different picture than the struggling widow Michael thought I was. Michael sank into a chair, flipping through the papers with shaking hands. I don't understand. Why would you hide this from me? From us. I sat across from him, feeling every one of my 62 years. Because you made it clear you didn't want my help. You wanted to be independent, to make your own way. But you needed assistance, and I wanted to be part of your life, even if you didn't know it. He looked up at me, and for a moment I saw the little boy who used to run to me with scraped knees and hurt feelings, trusting me to make everything better. Does Rebecca know? No. The letter was the first she's heard of any of it. Michael ran his hands through his hair, a gesture so like his father it made my chest tight. She's furious. She thinks you're trying to punish her for last night. And what do you think? He studied my face for a long moment. I think I don't know my own mother at all. The next morning, a car door slammed outside with enough force to rattle my windows. I was in the kitchen making coffee, steeling myself for what I knew was coming. Mom! Michael's voice echoed through the house as he burst through the front door without knocking. We need to talk. Now. I took my time finishing what I was doing before walking to the living room. Michael wasn't alone. Rebecca stood beside him, her face flushed with anger, designer purse clutched like a weapon. Good morning, I said evenly. Would either of you like some coffee? Cut the act, Rebecca snapped. What kind of sick game are you playing? I settled into my chair, regarding them both with a calmness that surprised even me. No game, Rebecca. Just truth. Michael paced the room like a caged animal. You can't just freeze Rebecca's accounts. Do you have any idea how embarrassing it was when her card was declined at Nordstrom yesterday? I almost laughed. Is that really what concerns you most? Embarrassment at a department store. You're trying to control us, Rebecca interjected. Just like you always have. Michael told me about his childhood. How you suffocated him after his father died. I set my coffee cup down with deliberate care. Is that what you believe, Michael? That I suffocated you? He stopped pacing, his hands clenching into fists. You never let me make my own decisions. Football, summer camp, even my college choice, you had to weigh in on everything. I weighed in because I was your mother, I said quietly. A single mother trying to raise a son and run a business after her husband died. I wasn't perfect, Michael. But everything I did came from love. Love. Rebecca scoffed. If you loved him, you wouldn't manipulate him like this. I fixed my gaze on her. Like what, exactly? By helping you maintain a lifestyle you can't afford? By giving you a house you couldn't otherwise live in? We don't need your money, Michael insisted. I make more than enough. No, I interrupted, surprising myself with my directness. You don't. Michael, your salary is substantial but not enough for the way you live. The house alone would consume nearly 70% of your take-home pay, if you were paying market rate. I reached for a folder on the side table and handed it to him. These are your financial records for the past 3 years. Every expenditure, every credit card bill, every investment that somehow never seems to grow. Michael reluctantly took the folder, his hands trembling slightly as he opened it. Rebecca moved to look over his shoulder, and I watched her face pale as she recognized the numbers. This is an invasion of privacy, Rebecca sputtered. But I could see the fear behind her indignation. Perhaps, I acknowledged. But sometimes truth needs to be invasive to be heard. Michael flipped through pages, his expression shifting from anger to confusion to something approaching horror. This can't be right. We don't spend this much on. He paused, pointing at a line item. What is Serenity Wellness Retreat? Rebecca quickly moved to close the folder. It's nothing important. Your mother is obviously making things up to come between us. Am I? I asked softly. Michael, there's a very exclusive spa in Colorado that charges $15,000 for a week-long wellness package that includes cosmetic procedures. They're known for their discretion. The color drained from Rebecca's face. You had me followed? No. I simply review all financial transactions on accounts linked to me. Remember? You've been using my credit line for 3 years. Michael turned to another page, his movements becoming more frantic. What about these cash withdrawals? $5,000 here, $8,000 there, $10,000 the month after that. I don't know what those are for, I admitted. Perhaps Rebecca can explain. The tension in the room was suffocating as Michael turned to his wife, questions burning in his eyes. For a moment Rebecca looked trapped, cornered. Then her expression hardened. This is ridiculous, she declared. I'm not going to stand here and be interrogated by a bitter old woman who can't accept that her son has moved on. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door, pausing only to look back at Michael. Are you coming? Michael stood frozen, the folder still in his hands, clearly torn between the woman he'd married and the evidence laid out before him. She's using money to control you, Michael, Rebecca insisted, desperation creeping into her voice. Just like she always has. Don't let her come between us. I remained seated, my heart pounding so hard I was sure they could hear it. This was the moment of truth. Would Michael see what was really happening, or would he once again choose the carefully constructed reality Rebecca had built around him? He looked at me and for the first time in years really saw me. Not the controlling mother Rebecca had convinced him I was, but the woman who had sacrificed everything to give him the best life possible. Mom, he began, his voice uncertain. It's your choice, Michael, I said softly. It always has been. Rebecca's face contorted with fury. If you stay here with her, don't bother coming home tonight. The ultimatum hung in the air like a storm cloud. Michael looked at the folder in his hands, then at his wife, then back at me. I need time to think, he finally said, his voice barely audible. Rebecca's laugh was bitter and sharp. Unbelievable. She's done it again, hasn't she? She stormed out, the door slamming behind her with enough force to shake the entire house. Michael and I were left alone with the weight of decades of misunderstandings and half-truths heavy between us. I never wanted it to come to this, I said quietly. Then why did it? He asked, sinking back into his chair, suddenly looking exhausted. Because sometimes, I replied. Love means fighting for the truth, even when it hurts everyone involved. Michael didn't stay long after Rebecca left. He said he needed space, time to process everything. I understood. The foundations of his life had just been shaken, and he needed to find his footing again. I spent the next few days in a strange kind of limbo, waiting for whatever would come next. Would Michael come back? Would Rebecca find some way to twist this situation to her advantage? I kept myself busy with work, grateful for the distraction of construction schedules and client meetings. On Thursday afternoon my doorbell rang. I opened it to find my old friend Linda standing there with a bottle of wine and a concerned expression. I brought reinforcements, she announced, holding up the bottle. You've been avoiding my calls for 3 days, and you look like you haven't slept in a week. Linda had been my closest friend since high school, long before David, before Michael, before life had carved its complicated paths through our hearts. If anyone could see through my carefully maintained composure, it was her. I let her in and she followed me to the kitchen, watching as I fetched glasses. Helen, you've been sending all your calls to voicemail for days. Your garden hasn't been touched in a week. And she peered at me closely. You're wearing the same sweater you had on when I stopped by Monday. I glanced down at myself. She was right, of course. So, she continued, pouring generous glasses for both of us. Are you going to tell me what's going on, or do I have to drag it out of you? I sighed, taking a sip of wine before launching into the whole story. The restaurant confrontation, the financial revelations, the documentation I'd shown Michael, and Rebecca's dramatic exit. Linda listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly troubled. When I finished, she shook her head slowly. Oh, Helen. I knew things were strained with Michael, but I had no idea it had gotten this bad. Neither did I really, I admitted. I've been so focused on trying to stay in their lives that I didn't see how toxic the whole situation had become. Linda took a thoughtful sip of her wine. There's something you should know. Something I probably should have told you years ago. My stomach tightened. What is it? She set her glass down, choosing her words carefully. About 2 years ago, I saw Rebecca at the Grandview Hotel downtown. She was with a man, definitely not Michael. I stared at her, not understanding at first. You mean? They were very intimate, Linda confirmed. I didn't say anything because I wasn't completely certain, and I didn't want to cause problems if there was some innocent explanation. 2 years ago, I repeated slowly. That was around the time Michael had mentioned they were having some difficulties, that they were seeing a marriage counselor to work through things. Linda grimaced. Unless the counselor was a tall man with a beard who likes to hold hands in hotel lobbies, I don't think therapy was what was happening. I felt sick, not just at the revelation of Rebecca's betrayal, but at the realization that I'd probably been financing it. Those mysterious cash withdrawals, the expensive wellness retreats. Had I been paying for her to cheat on my son? There's more, Linda said reluctantly. Last summer at Janet's retirement party, Rebecca had too much to drink. She was bragging to some of the women about how she had this perfect setup, a husband who didn't question her spending and a mother-in-law who unknowingly paid for her lifestyle. The words hit me like a physical blow. She knew? All this time, she knew I was helping financially. Linda nodded. From what she said, she figured it out pretty early on. She thought it was hilarious that you were trying to be so secretive about it. I felt like I'd been played for a complete fool. All this time I thought I was being clever, helping Michael while protecting his pride. Instead, I'd been financing Rebecca's deception, while she systematically poisoned my relationship with my son. I need to tell Michael, I said, reaching for my phone. Linda gently laid her hand over mine. Are you sure that's wise? He's already dealing with so much. He deserves to know the truth. All of it. Before Linda could respond, my phone rang. Michael's name appeared on the screen, and my heart started racing. Michael? Is everything okay? His voice was strange, controlled in a way that immediately worried me. I need to see you. Can I come over? Of course. I'm here. I'll be there in 15 minutes. He hung up without saying goodbye. Linda stood, gathering her purse. I should go. This sounds like a conversation you two need to have alone. After she left, I paced the living room, my mind racing with possibilities. Had he found out about Rebecca's affairs on his own? Had she confessed? Or was he coming to tell me that despite everything, he was choosing her? Michael arrived exactly 15 minutes later, his face drawn and pale. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Come in, I said, stepping aside. Can I get you anything? Nothing, he replied, moving past me into the living room. He paced for a moment, then turned to face me, his expression unreadable. I found something, he said, his voice oddly flat. He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket and handed it to me. Inside were bank statements I'd never seen before, accounts with numbers I didn't recognize, transactions to places I'd never heard of. One name jumped out. Caribbean Private Banking Limited. What is this? I asked, though a sinking feeling told me I already knew. Rebecca has a secret account, Michael said, his voice cracking slightly. She's been transferring money into it for over 2 years. Nearly $200,000. I sat down heavily, the statements clutched in my hand. Oh, Michael. I'm so sorry. He laughed, a bitter sound that held no humor. You're sorry? I'm the one who should be apologizing. You tried to warn me and I wouldn't listen. I believed her lies about you because it was easier than facing the truth. What truth? That I married someone who never loved me, he said simply. Someone who saw us as nothing but a way to fund her real life. I wanted to comfort him, to tell him that surely it wasn't that calculating. But I couldn't bring myself to lie, Not when truth was finally breaking through years of deception. There's more, he continued, sitting down across from me. I hired a private investigator. My eyes widened. Michael, you didn't need to dash. I did, he finished firmly. I needed to know how deep this went. And Mom, his voice broke, it's worse than I thought. The investigator had uncovered not just the affair Linda had witnessed, but multiple relationships over the years. Rebecca had been systematically stealing from their accounts, building her escape fund while planning her exit strategy. She was going to leave, Michael said, his voice hollow. The investigator found emails between her and this man she's been seeing. They were planning to take the kids and move to the Caribbean once she'd saved enough money. I reached for his hand and to my surprise he let me take it. The children, how are Sophie and Tommy? Confused. Rebecca told them I'm on a business trip. His eyes filled with tears. I haven't figured out how to tell them that their mother has been lying to all of us. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything pressing down on us. Finally Michael spoke again, his voice stronger. I've been such a fool, Mom. And not just about Rebecca. He squeezed my hand. I let her convince me that you were the enemy, that you were controlling and manipulative, when all along it was her. We were both deceived, I said gently. He shook his head. No, I should have seen it. The way she isolated me from you, from my friends, the way she always had an explanation for everything. The missing money, the late nights, the constant criticism of you. He paused. I wanted so badly to believe we had this perfect life that I ignored all the signs it was falling apart. I wanted to tell him it wasn't his fault, but I knew he needed to work through this himself. Instead I asked, what will you do now? Michael straightened, a resolve settling over his features that reminded me so much of David it made my heart ache. I've frozen all our joint accounts. I've contacted a lawyer not just about divorce, but about pressing charges for the theft. And Mom, he hesitated, I need to ask you a huge favor. Anything, I said and meant it. Can the kids and I stay here for a while? Just until I figure things out. For the first time in years I felt hope flutter in my chest. Of course you can. This is your home too. It always has been. That evening, after Michael left to pack some things for himself and the children, I stood in my kitchen looking out at the backyard where he used to play as a boy. So much had changed, so much pain had been inflicted. But maybe, just maybe, from these broken pieces we could build something new, something honest. My phone buzzed with a text from Linda. Everything okay? I thought for a moment before typing back. No, but I think someday it will be. The next morning, Michael returned with 2 small suitcases and 2 very confused children. Sophie, now 8, looked around the house with wide eyes, while 5-year-old Tommy clutched a stuffed dinosaur and stayed close to his father's side. Daddy said we're having a sleepover at Grandma's house, Sophie announced. But he won't tell us why Mommy can't come. My heart broke a little for these innocent children caught in the middle of adult deceptions and failures. Well, I said, kneeling down to their level, I'm just happy you're here. Should we make pancakes for breakfast? Tommy's face lit up. With chocolate chips. With chocolate chips, I confirmed, as I watched my grandchildren eat breakfast at my kitchen table, chattering about their friends and their toys and their upcoming school year. I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The simple joy of being needed by my family. Michael sat beside them, looking more relaxed than he had in days. When Sophie asked again where Mommy was, he just said she was taking care of some grown-up business and that they'd talk about it later. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was enough for now. Sometimes protecting the people you love means choosing when to reveal painful realities. I'd learned that lesson the hard way. But for the first time in years, I felt like we were finally on the path toward something real. A family built on honesty instead of secrets, on love instead of manipulation. The truth had been devastating, but it had also set us free. 3 weeks later, my quiet house had transformed into something I'd almost forgotten it could be. A real home filled with the chaos and joy of family life. The sound of children's laughter echoed through rooms that had been silent for too long, and I found myself smiling at things I once would have considered disruptions. Grandma, watch this. Tommy called out, attempting a cartwheel in the living room that looked more like a sideways tumble. Very impressive, I applauded, though my heart skipped as he narrowly missed the coffee table. Maybe we should practice those in the backyard though. Michael appeared in the doorway, looking more rested than he had in weeks. Tommy, what did we say about gymnastics in the house? My grandson sighed dramatically. That we save them for outside. Exactly. Why don't you and Sophie go check if the sprinkler is working? It's getting pretty warm out there. The children didn't need to be told twice, racing outside with shrieks of excitement. Michael collapsed onto the couch beside me, and for the first time since this whole ordeal began, he actually looked at peace. I don't know how you did it, he said, watching the kids through the window. Raising me alone all those years. I smiled, patting his arm. One day at a time. Sometimes 1 hour at a time. He nodded, staring out at Sophie and Tommy as they discovered the joy of running through the sprinkler. Their delighted screams carried through the open windows like music. The divorce papers were filed yesterday, he said quietly. Rebecca's lawyer called this morning. What does she want? Everything, he said with a humorless laugh. The house, full custody of the kids, alimony. She's claiming I turned you against her, and that you're using your financial position to punish her. I shook my head, unsurprised by the accusation. What did your lawyer say? That she doesn't have a leg to stand on. The financial records clearly show she was stealing from us. Plus, he hesitated, then continued, the private investigator found more evidence. Multiple affairs, Mom. Going back years. I squeezed his hand, offering silent comfort. Some wounds were still too fresh for words. I keep thinking about all the signs I missed, he continued. All the times I defended her to you, convinced she was right and you were trying to interfere. I was so blind. We see what we want to see sometimes, I replied gently. Especially when it comes to people we love. He looked at me, then really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years. I'm sorry, Mom. For everything. For believing her lies, for shutting you out, for the way she treated you at the restaurant. You don't need to apologize. Yes, I do, he insisted. I was wrong. And I wasted too many years letting Rebecca come between us. Outside, Sophie let out a particularly loud shriek as Tommy aimed the sprinkler directly at her. Michael smiled. A genuine smile that reached his eyes for the first time in months. They've missed you, he said. Even though Rebecca limited their time with you, they always talked about Grandma Helen and her stories and her chocolate chip cookies. My heart swelled. They're wonderful children. They are, he agreed. And they deserve better than what they've had. A mother who was more interested in her secret life than their happiness. A father who was too wrapped up in maintaining appearances to see what was happening right in front of him. You're being too hard on yourself, I said firmly. You're a good father, Michael. Look at how you've handled all this, protecting them, keeping their routine as normal as possible despite everything falling apart. The next morning, while Michael took the children to their summer day camp, I made a decision that had been forming in my mind for weeks. It was time to stop hiding who I really was. I started with a call to Patricia. I want to go public with my role at Morrison & Associates, I told her. No more operating behind the scenes or letting other people take credit. It's time everyone knew who's really been running things. Patricia didn't sound surprised. About time, if you ask me. The board will support you completely. They know you're the reason the company has thrived all these years. Next, I called Linda. I'm having a dinner party this Saturday, I announced. Nothing fancy, just a few close friends. It's been too long since I entertained. Helen Morrison, social butterfly, Linda teased. What brought this on? Life's too short to spend it waiting for permission to live, I replied. Will you come? Wild horses couldn't keep me away. By Saturday evening, my dining room table was set for 8. Linda and her husband, my longtime friend Robert, who'd recently been widowed, Patricia and her husband, Michael, and me. The children were having a supervised playdate with friends, giving Michael a much-needed evening among adults. It felt strange at first, hosting again after so many years of quiet isolation. But as wine was poured and conversation flowed, I felt something inside me awakening, like a part of myself I'd forgotten existed. To new beginnings, Patricia toasted, raising her glass. And to old friends who remind us who we really are, I added, looking around at the faces of people who had known me, the real me, all along. Later, as we moved to the living room for coffee, Robert sat beside me on the sofa. It's good to see you like this, Helen, he said warmly. Reminds me of the dinner parties you and David used to host. You always had a gift for bringing people together. I smiled, touched by the memory. It's been too long. Life gets in the way sometimes, he agreed. After Martha died, I couldn't bear the thought of socializing. But eventually I realized she wouldn't have wanted me to stop living. That's exactly it, I said softly. I've been existing, not living. Trying so hard to stay connected to Michael that I lost touch with everything else that makes life worthwhile. Robert nodded, understanding in his eyes. Well, if you're looking to make up for lost time, there's a concert series starting next weekend at the park. I happen to have an extra ticket. I felt a flutter of something I hadn't experienced in years, anticipation, possibility. I'd like that very much. Across the room I caught Michael watching us, a small smile playing at his lips. When our eyes met, he gave me a subtle nod of approval. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, Michael found me in the kitchen washing the last of the dishes. I can't remember the last time I saw you laugh like that, he said, picking up a towel to help dry. It's been a while, I admitted. I'm glad, Mom. You deserve to be happy. He paused, then added with a grin, Robert seems nice. I felt my cheeks warm. He's just an old friend. Michael made a skeptical sound. An old friend who couldn't take his eyes off you all evening. I swatted him with the dish towel. Stop it. I'm serious, he said, suddenly earnest. You're never too old for companionship, for connection. That's one thing this whole mess with Rebecca taught me. Life's too short to spend it with people who don't value you. The divorce proceedings continued for another month, but Rebecca's position grew weaker with each revelation. When faced with evidence of her theft and infidelity, she finally agreed to a settlement that gave Michael full custody of the children in exchange for a modest payment and his agreement not to press criminal charges. I could fight for more, Michael told me as we signed the final papers. I could make her face consequences for what she did. But I just want this over with. The kids need stability, not more drama. I squeezed his hand. You're choosing peace over revenge. That takes real strength. On a crisp October morning, as autumn painted the trees in brilliant colors, Michael made an announcement over breakfast. I've been thinking, he said, setting down his coffee cup. We should look for a new place. All of us together. I felt a moment of confusion. You want to move out? No, Mom, he clarified quickly. I want us to move together. This house has so many memories, but maybe it's time for a fresh start. Somewhere new for all of us. Sophie looked up from her cereal, eyes wide. We're going to live with Grandma forever? Would you like that? Michael asked. Yes, both children chorused, and my heart nearly burst with joy. We found the perfect house 3 weeks later. A spacious ranch with a big backyard, close to the children's school and my office, with enough room for everyone to have their own space while still feeling like a family. I want to pay half, Michael insisted when we were ready to make an offer. It's not about pride anymore. It's about partnership. We're building this new life together, Mom. The day we moved into our new home, I stood in the empty living room of the old house, surrounded by boxes and memories. Michael found me there, Sophie and Tommy running around us in circles, excited about their new adventure. Any regrets? He asked. I looked around at the space where he'd taken his first steps, where David and I had shared so many dreams, where I'd spent too many lonely years trying to figure out how to reconnect with my son. No, I said, surprising myself with how certain I felt. This house gave us what we needed when we needed it. But we're ready for what comes next. Our new home welcomed us with possibilities. The children claimed their rooms with infectious enthusiasm. Michael set up his home office, and I found myself at the center of it all, not relegated to the edges anymore, but an integral part of a family that functioned on honesty and mutual respect. 6 months later, Robert and I were officially dating, much to Michael's amusement and the children's delight. They called him Grandpa Bob, and he spoiled them almost as much as I did. Morrison and Associates Construction was thriving under my public leadership, and I found myself energized by the challenges of running a business without having to hide in the shadows. Most importantly, Michael and I had built something new from the wreckage of our old relationship. We were partners now, co-parents to Sophie and Tommy, friends as well as family. One evening, as we sat on our new back porch watching the children play in the yard, Michael turned to me with a thoughtful expression. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Rebecca hadn't thrown that plate? I considered the question. I think the truth would have come out eventually. Maybe not as dramatically, but secrets have a way of revealing themselves. I'm glad it happened the way it did, he said quietly. Even though it was painful, we needed the shock of it to break through all the pretense. I nodded, watching Sophie teach Tommy how to catch fireflies as the sun set behind the trees. Sometimes the best things come from the worst moments. My phone buzzed with a text from Linda. Dinner next week? I want to hear all about your date with Robert. I smiled, typing back. Absolutely. I have so much to tell you. As I tucked the phone away, I realized that for the first time in years, I wasn't just existing anymore. I was living fully, honestly, surrounded by people who valued me for who I really was. The fortune I'd hidden for so long was now being used openly to build something far more valuable than any bank account. A family bound by love and truth instead of secrets and obligation. And that was worth more than all the money in the world.